On today's show, here's why the Cleveland Cavaliers have wanted Georges Niang for a while now. We're going to explain that and more about the Cavs' recent free agent moves on today's show.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, where first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com. The promo code is LOCKEDON. I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and the NBA for outlets like SB Nation, Cleveland Magazine, and the Just Basketball Show. That man over there is Evan Dammarell, the founder, the proprietor of Down Euclid. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Evan, Georges Niang, let's dive into it. 3 years, all guaranteed, $8.66 million on average, $8.2 million in the first year, ages 30 to 32. I saw some confusion, kind of mostly amongst Browns Twitter people, which is very funny, about this contract structure. This is using part of the middle-level exception, so they do have some of it left if they wanted to use it. Evan, what do you think of Georges Niang, most recently of the Philadelphia 76ers?
So, on paper, Georges Niang makes a lot of sense just in terms of his volume as a shooter. As you noted, he's a mid-level exception signing, but I'll be frank, I didn't watch a ton of Sixers basketball. Obviously, whenever they play the Cavs, or maybe when I had some free time to watch them on TV, I checked them out. And I just asked a friend of the program, Jordan Christmas, who knows the Sixers quite better than I do, what are his feelings? And after he woke up from his nap, he texted me that Niang is a great shooter that will let that thing fly. You only want him attacking a closeout with 2 dribbles at max. 2, you'll see why he deserved the minivan nickname, because he is a little slow. 3, he's a 3-4 but may not close lineups because he's not that great defensively. And most importantly, he's a dude who is also willing to kind of just make those grind out hustle plays and just maybe do some of the dirty work that some other players don't do. And he's also fine at talking trash to opposing benches. But for me, Niang, just like on paper, the appeal is he's a dude who's just, as Jordan said, is not afraid to shoot it. Like, I was very surprised to see, like, just based on his averages last season, he attempted 7 3-pointers per game, which is pretty, 4.9 3-pointers per game, which is still quite a bit. I was thinking of Max Struss. That's a lot, and I think just as like a stretchier 4, he could be a lot of fun next to Jared Allen or Evan Mobley.
So he like Max Struss is a very high volume 3-point shooter, near the top of his position every of his career. Again, this felt very intentional to me. I think they targeted guys that take threes and love to let it fly and love to just bomb away from outside. They needed guys like that. They clearly targeted guys like that. And the Cavs have had interest in Niang for a while now. So I like they wanted him at the deadline. They offered some picks. Philly wasn't selling. They get him on the open market now. And we should note, like, the sign and trade that you do with Struss, who might have been a mid-level target, this allows you to get both of them. And I think you're a better team for getting both of them, cost be darn. 40% for 3 every year's career, but 1 was at 39 the 1 year he didn't hit 40%. This is like a really, really good shooter who's bigger. Played with Donovan Mitchell as well, which I think like there will be some natural chemistry there. Has some Utah familiarity with Mitchell. This just has like a shooting as like a size thing, as a bigger shooter, I think just makes all the sense in the world. And you didn't blow like the full mid-level. Like theoretically you have a little bit left to use if you want to. This was like a relatively good bit of business for me, even if the guy, he's 30, 32. Is there a bigger defensive decline coming that's tricky? I'm curious to see what kind of comes out of this.
So, as I had noted on Monday's show, Kobe Altman made it pretty clear that the Cavs are going to prioritize shooting this offseason, especially just maybe they're not needle movers, but like, at least in my eyes on paper, Struss and Niang are guys that will move the needle in terms of just 3-point volume. When the Niang signing became somewhat official, I mean, it's not official until July 6th, of course, team-wise, but like it's heavily reported. I dove into the numbers a little bit. Like in terms of just amount of attempts and volume of 3-point shots, Niang would have jumped up to third on the list for the Cavs if he was playing for Cleveland last season, and he took the same amount of attempts that he did with Philly. So again, like the addition of Niang and Struss are going to just add extra perimeter scoring threats. Like you had noted, like he's not in the peak prime of his career, like age-wise, but he provides you something that you clearly need. He's a guy who's also more bombs away from three, but also we can think about the Cedi Osman aspect here. He's a little bit more consistent, at least in that regard.
The other thing that I would say about this that I think is interesting to me is I could see what position he plays at and how he does kind of look defensively in a different context. He's not like going to be a lockdown defender for you, but he's 6'6", 6'7", 230. You can like work with that positionally. Like he's a big boy, and like that can work for you if you use it correctly. He's a light rebounder as well, which is like a little concerning for a guy that's going to play some four. There's a lot. This is a whole episode I think we can do, but there's a lot of what Cleveland has done that I think it's signaling, hey, we're banking on Evan Mobley's growth and him ascending in a different way. But I'm curious to see if they play him more at the three than he did in Philly just based on the roster. So last year, played 3,006 possessions for the 76ers. The most common lineup with him as a small forward was accounted for 44 of those possessions. That's minuscule. This is like a guy who mostly played the four. Cleveland has, because of its roster, has leaned into big ball at times. So do we see at times them try to go Niang and Mobley, Allen, and just put the shooting on the floor? Mobley covers for him. Maybe you play zone in those instances with Mobley. Like, I'm curious to see if they try to shoehorn him in and his shooting in, if in moments when Strus isn't out there, or just to put shooting next to your two bigs. I'm curious to see like how that works for him, and I'm curious to see what that means for Dean Wade's minutes in the rotation as well.
So, to the Dean Wade point first, I think Wade is your fourth power forward in terms of just like rotational stuff. Like,
yeah, he's your fourth big.
Like Niang is maybe fifth, just because of how you feel about Damian Jones too, in terms of Wade. But Niang, for me, at least, just provides you 3-point shooting. I think you roll with it because he's your new shiny toy, and you see how it functions, and just work on the next steps from there. And to your point, like the defensive issues and concerns are definitely there, but if you do like slot him in as like a big boy three and you put him next to Mobley and Allen, like it's not apples to apples, but you do have a lot of history defending for a guy who maybe isn't a natural three and maybe isn't the best defensively at the three spot, but is still covered by Mobley and Allen, and in turn provides you that spacing and perimeter threat that I'm talking about Larry Markkinen. You lost when you lost with you traded Markkinen to get Mitchell, so it's not the same thing, because I think Markkinen is just very much up here compared to Niang, but it's a pretty good upgrade, and again, gives you a lot of roster fluidity and creativity, because you and I talked about this a lot. Like the Cavs are able to kind of get like a bigger 3-4 type player in free agency, and they did. Like that's a box they can tick, because that's a dude that they can do a lot of creative things with, and just in terms of like offense and covering for him on defense at times.
All right, after the break, let's dive into what the Cavs are losing. They traded away Cedi Osman and Lamar Stevens as part of the Max Strus sign-and trade. What are the Cavs losing, if anything, of significance in that deal? We'll talk about that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. Remember, first-time users over there can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. All you got to do to play is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you win. You can up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, the NFL, PGA, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, MMA, boxing, disc golf, cricket, Ashes are going over now, and much, much more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. You can download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. So again, if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, thanks again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Every day, we're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to start making lineups. It's going to be a good time. A lot of new roster faces. We're going to dive into how they might fit, what that looks like. Evan, I look at the Osman and Stevens stuff through a very financial lens. Because you had to move Cedi. Like, Cedi and Lamar, if you'd kept them on the roster in some way, would have put you in the luxury tax. They don't want to be in the luxury tax. So you weren't just going to be able to keep Osman and do that. Yeah, if you want to argue they should be in the luxury tax, go ahead and do it. I don't think this is the time you dive into that. It triggers all kinds of things. You really want your luxury tax years to be when you're bona fide, right on the doorstep of title contention. I think we all would agree that they're not exactly bona fide there. They haven't proven that based on the playoffs last year. And with Lamar, Stevens was good depth. But based on the moves they've made, he was clearly not going to be in the rotation. And I think when you take his $1.93 million for next year and you carve that off of the salary cap books, you just have a little more wiggle room to work with financially. We should talk about the basketball side of it, but that's why they did this. They didn't do this because they don't think these guys are good or they don't like them or they don't value them or the whatever you want to say. I think this really does starts to stem from the financial point of it and just trying to create as much room as possible for the roster you have and to make this make financial sense as well.
So the Osman aspect of it is interesting. I was a little surprised that they maybe weren't able to facilitate a trade and just before his contract became fully guaranteed. And then Woj, I believe, just came out of left field and just like, hey, the Cavs are guaranteeing his salary. So I'm like, okay, you lose a little bit of that luxury that could be the linchpin of a trade where a team could acquire Cedi Osman, waive him, and it's no harm, no foul. The Cavs absorb $6.7 million. I think that's why you look at a lot of Nasir Little with the Blazers and what they're trying to do. But poor Portland.
They have Scoot. They're going to be fine.
Scoot and Shaden is a really good foundation to build off of, but just Dame did them dirty, as I said, but also the Blazers did Dame dirty for a while too. But
check out Locked On Blazers.
Yeah, check out Locked On Blazers with those guys. But it's
Mike Richmond. Yeah.
Mike Richmond, thank you. Just the Osman thing was interesting. I think them using him as a trade chip works. To your point, the Stevens thing, especially with the upgrades they made, whether it was just Niang by itself, you're like, okay, he has a place in the rotation over Stevens because I know people like to dog Isaac Okoro for the lack of shooting, but Lamar Stevens was less of a shooting threat than Isaac Okoro last season. So best of luck to him. I wonder what the Cavs, if maybe there's a ripple effect not culturally, but chemistry wise for this locker room, just because Lamar was kind of that catalyst that everyone gravitated to, especially during this rebuild. But again, we had this conversation when we were talking about Max Strus more in depth in the trade itself. You have to make these uncomfy sacrifices if you want to make tangible upgrades to a team that has legitimate potential to make a run in the playoffs. And I'm not saying championship, I'm going to be realistic here, but they could definitely make some more noise just with the moves they made within the margins to upgrade what they've built in terms of just a very top-heavy team.
What I think they lose from a basketball sense with Osman, I don't think is significant. You got Max Strus. Max Strus is a better defender. He's a better shooter. He's more dependable. He's played in bigger games. He's a better player. They got a guy who I think they should trust. And if at a certain point, if JB Bickerstaff doesn't trust Max Strus, then I think that's a whole other conversation. Strus has been trusted by Eric freaking Spoelstra in the Miami Heat, who've made 2 finals in 4 years. This is
the best coach in basketball.
Yeah, the best coach in basketball trusts this guy. He's going to be trusted. He's going to be empowered. I think he's going to start at the 3. There's not going to be swaps of time where Cedi's Strus is in the doghouse for 2 weeks and he's not playing for whatever reason because of defensive effort. That's not going to happen here. With Stevens, I think you do lose some toughness. You lose a locker room guy. You lose a guy who will rebound and bang and do some of that stuff. But I think it wasn't essential last year, and I like Lamar, but it wasn't going to be essential this year either. I think like, I don't think this is anything they can't just, like, they're not going to be fine figuring out, right? Like, there's nothing here that isn't just going to kind of work itself out, I think, ultimately.
Yeah. These are the sacrifices you have to make from a basketball standpoint, because I guess I focused on the trade aspect of it. Yeah, Strus, we hammered this home in Monday's episode. Like, Max Strus is just a clear upgrade over Cedi Osman. I know you can break down like the nitty gritty of like numbers and stuff like that, but I have more faith in Max Strus as a player on either end of the floor than I do Cedi Osman. That's just Cedi Osman the player. Like, Cedi Osman the person I like quite a bit, but that's neither here nor there. Like, you have to make these tough decisions to make your team better, but it's just tough. Like, if Lamar Stevens somehow came out this upcoming season as a very consistent 3-point threat for, if, like, let's say he sticks with San Antonio, he becomes like a consistent 3-point threat, maybe there's a little bit of buyer's remorse there, but just on paper, heading into this offseason and based on what we know, Georges Niang was a huge upgrade over just like Lamar Stevens and Dean Wade at this point, frankly. And then you look at Max Strus, like, he is the best shooter on the market. You have to make a sacrifice, and you do move on from one of your more inconsistent players who people were like, oh my God, why didn't they waive Cedi Osman because his money became guaranteed? The Cavs were so strapped up financially that it would have made no difference if they waived him, so he was a trade chip at that point. Either you keep him or you trade him, and the Cavs found a way to trade him, and let's say like a Strus moved in, materialized, you at least still have Osman in your back pocket, either as the trade chip or he's a dude who is on the back end of your rotation heading into this upcoming season.
Yeah, look, if they had not gotten Strus, you could have seen Osman, you run it back, you figure it out, you look for an upgrade a year from now. That's not where this ended up, and I think they're better off for it. Like, end of the day, it's a better team. This is a better basketball team today than it was before July 1st. Strus and Niang and Ty, we'll talk about Ty Jerome and Damian Jones on the fringes, but they got 2 rotation guys, and the 2 guys that have gone out so far were fringe rotation guys last year. Osman a little more featured, but 2 guys that, you know, there was clearly a limit on what they're going to provide you. All right, after this, we'll talk about Ty Jerome. We'll talk about Damian Jones. All right, let's 5 minutes here on Ty Jerome or so. Evan, he's a different profile of backup guard than Cleveland has had. You know, he's not a one-to-one Tony Neto replacement. He's bigger, 6'5", has a good assist-to-turnover ratio, decent three-point volume, good enough three-point shooter. This, to me, feels like a guard that if you needed to, if you wanted to, he could play with like a Garland or Mitchell, and they handle the ball, maybe do more of the traditional point guard stuff, especially in Garland's case, obviously. But it's not just a guy that is there to be a game manager and do some of that work.
So Ty Jerome is interesting to me because we talked about this in between episodes. I may have noted it in Monday's show as well. Like, I think he's a dude who could be your 9th, 10th man in the rotation heading into this season, just because if you look at Karis LeVert and how he functions as like a primary ball handler with bench units, and he's much more comfortable attacking the basket and being a guy who's a bit more of a slasher. Sure, there's the shooting aspect to him as well, and him kind of finding his way off ball when he's playing with like Mitchell or Garland or both of those guys. But like, you look at Ty Jerome, like, he's a dude who could just act as a guy who floats on the perimeter and benefits from a lot of players that like to attack the basket and slash, and just be a dude who can provide you just like that 3-point shot on a like a driving kick situation, and like that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting to see where he will fit in within like the general calculus of things. Like, he's not a great defender. He's technically a 2 guard, but he has played some points as well. I think he's comfortable at least passing and moving the rock and making basic passes, so that's a benefit. And what I'm trying to get at is like, I would play him over Ricky Rubio right now, because you have 2 ball-dominant guards in Garland and Mitchell. You have LeVert, who is clearly a part of your rotation. You need a dude who is clearly comfortable with the ball in his hands, and more than anything, has a consistent 3-point shot, like Jerome, at least compared to Ricky Rubio.
It's an interesting question. If Rubio is the guy that he was last year, and like it's just done for him, then that's a more compelling argument to me. If Rubio plays better, if Rubio is like right this fall, he will be a bigger defender at the point of attack in a way that Jerome just isn't. Jerome would get attacked and picked on, and he just doesn't. He's not going to hold up in that way. Rubio, if he's right and can move, is a different level of player, is a different level of defender, and I think I would still lean in the Rubio direction. But if he's not right and he's not good, then this gets into a place where maybe you do play Ty Jerome. And it's worth noting, Mark Stein had this on his Substack, that Jerome and Cavs President Basketball Operations Kobe Altman have known each other for 10 years. Jerome's been a favorite of Altman. And if people don't know, he was on the Warriors last year on a two-way deal. Cleveland offered him just enough so the Warriors couldn't match it, which was just a little shrewd bit of business by the Cavs. He also, people might remember, is one of the guys that shredded the Cavs when the Warriors came in, didn't play anybody, and beat the Cavs in Cleveland when they were playing everybody.
One of the most pathetic basketball games I've ever seen the Cleveland Cavaliers play, and I've been watching this team for a very long time, and I'm just holy cow, they actually laid down and let Ty Jerome do this.
Yeah, that was a weird one. So Jerome's fine. I think he's interesting. Worth a flyer, 2-year, $5 million deal. That's like pocket change in terms of the NBA salary cap. So to flip to Damian Jones.
Mm-hmm.
More athletic choice to play the 5 than Robin Lopez. He has a higher foul rate if you look at cleaning the glass at Cleveland's other centers, which is just a different profile than they went at last summer. But he can catch lobs. He's really athletic, and he does block shots. He's a solid enough rebounder last few years too. Evan, as far as a backup center goes, without trading for someone, using your exceptions to sign someone at a higher cost, just trading for a guy like this and not giving up any players, and I haven't even seen it seems like they may have just absorbed him.
Straight up, according to Woj, it's just straight up absorption. The Cavs are just absorbing him into his payroll. Into their payroll.
So they have this Ochai Agbaji trade exception that they obviously got from the Mitchell trade. I wonder if he just got absorbed into that, but no one has reported or said. I haven't gotten a good answer on it. I wonder if that's just it though.
It's interesting.
He's a good enough lob catching option for you if you want a backup center.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know he's a guy that Cavs kind of had a pin in leading up to the trade deadline last year when he was with the Lakers. He ultimately ended up with the Jazz. But to your point, he is 28 years old. Robin Lopez is 35 currently. Robin Lopez is going to be 36 at some point this season too. You have a younger option as the backup center, but it's not like you're throwing an 18-year-old or a guy like Khalifa Diop out there who or at least in Kobe Altman's eyes, isn't quite NBA ready. So Jones to me is that dude who could be your 10th, 11th guy. He's a guy who is we talked about the fourth big, and that's Dean Wade. Maybe Damian Jones makes enough of a case just because he's a dude who can, as you said, he's foul prone, but if you're playing a team like Milwaukee or Philadelphia, because at least Joel Embiid will still be there after the Sixers kind of figure out their next steps, or just even Bam Adebayo with the Heat, or what the Pacers are doing with Miles Turner. Damian Jones is a dude who can at least absorb some fouls for you to alleviate the pressure and have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley either be fresh or available for closing moments of game, whether it's the postseason or just a regular season game as well. Jones doesn't have to be the dude who is giving you consistent minute-on-minute stuff. And we talked about this at the season's end, and I talked about how the Cavs just kind of need to get younger on the margins. Jones is a guy, to me, in my eyes, that, and Ty Jerome as well, you're getting younger-ish players that have NBA experience, but aren't as old, and maybe kind of just give you a little bit more luxury on the margins and at the depth positions, so you can kind of get a little bit more creative rotation-wise. So if you run into a team like the Knicks, who have overwhelming depth, at least comparatively what the Cavs had last postseason, you have at least a little bit more versatility and fluidity versus only having 5, maybe 6 viable players, depending on what Isaac Okoro you're going to get. So it just gives the Cavs more depth, and that's a good thing in my eyes.
Yeah, I like this as a backup center option. I think Lopez was fine as a vibes guy, but clearly wasn't exactly what they need. And look, Jones is going to make some mistakes, and all these guys they've gotten are not going to be perfect for you, but it works well enough. Evan, on this, just is there any, I don't want to say specific names, but is there a archetype of player that you would want Cleveland, if you were offering input into them grabbing before free agency ends, before they round out this roster? 13 spots, 2 spots open. Don't know if they'll fill both of them based on the pricing, and they're 3 point something under the luxury tax line. But what kind of player would you want to look at if you're that?
So the Cavs have gotten younger, as I had noted, and younger and stronger and faster, Daft Punk stuff, whatever. But like they could use another veteran. If Danny Green enjoyed his time with the Cavs, and he's kind of just understanding like, hey, you're not going to play much, but like you're going to be that dude who gives us like that veteran voice and presence within the locker room, or you can be the on-court coach or whatever. Like maybe you take a stab at Danny Green because like there's at least a rotation spot at the small forward position, or I don't know, maybe if you don't feel 100% confident in Damian Jones, or you find a guy who can provide you a little bit more depth and stretchiness, maybe you get a center at that spot. But like you said, I think the Cavs ultimately maybe sign like a veteran at the vet min and roll into this season with 14 players under contract, 3 guys on two-way deals, leave that last roster spot open either to guarantee one of those two-way contracts or just at least give you a little bit more space to work with within the margins if you want to kind of upgrade the back end of your rotation some more.
Yeah, Danny Green, I think just as a veteran leader, as a wing, you maybe could just have. If he wants to like play another year, I think that would make a ton of sense. I wouldn't mind bringing back Neto as well if you wanted that kind of just manager point guard. I think you're going for very simple stuff, and it seems like where we're gonna end up is Bates, Isaiah Mobley, Craig Porter Jr. on two ways. I feel like you should feel okay about your depth right now, but I think just having, if you're going to go really young on some of those, and maybe like Mobley plays at a certain point or Porter Jr. has to play in a certain instance, I think you want to at least just have maybe like one other guy on your main roster just to give yourself a little more depth in case like an injury happens or someone gets sick or there's a suspension or whatever. Like I think you use one more veteran body on the roster just to let JB Bickerstaff put his head on his pillow at night and not like freak out about having to like play Craig Porter Jr. when he has never like thought about him as a guy at all.
So on the inverse of that, also if you like just keep that last roster spot open, let's say like Craig Porter Jr. for some reason shows some juice at the NBA level and you feel comfortable enough, like if he's sustainable, or I'm going to more so look at Isaiah Mobley here. Like Isaiah Mobley maybe like just shows signs of like, okay, he's a little too good for the G League. Let's just bring him up. Having that last roster spot open just makes it a lot more clean and a lot easier. And then if you're the Cavs, maybe like Pete Nance, if he shows flashes in Summer League, sticks with the team through training camp and is with the charge still, like you sign him to a two-way deal instead, or like you look at other options within that because you can kind of keep churning out that rotational talent. So I'm an advocate at least of like going in with 14 on your roster, leave that last spot open. Either it's for a trade because you can bring in 2 guys if you have to somehow, or just get creative with it. Or if a two-way guy just shows like, okay, he's ready for the NBA, like yeah, just drop him right in on like a Kobe Altman special.
Pete Nance has a very weird shot form. We're gonna end it there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell.
It's interesting. Like you watch him shoot. I was at Cavs practice Saturday. Yeah, it's Sunday. So Saturday. This weekend's been such a blur for me. But and I was watching him shoot. I'm like, it's not gonna go in. And then it went in. I'm like, just like watching it go over and over again. So.
Yeah. All right. I'm Chris Manning. That's Evan Dammarell. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Back at you after the holiday. Happy 4th, everyone. If you're in America, enjoy your day off. If you're not, have fun at work, I guess. Talk to you soon.